We are going to resume our session. We don't have much time, but we have a lot of very interesting things to discuss and to share. This second part of the seminar, as we said, is going to be focused on residential care, which is one of the most questioned resources in the system, because nursing homes are not really closely connected with the residents' everyday lives. So a process of transformation of nursing homes has commenced, trying to come up with a model based more on smaller centers, home care, etc. So to discuss all of these interesting topics, we have wonderful opinion leaders that are going to be telling us about their ideas. Thank you very much for joining us. I will be introducing them first so that we can then dive directly into their presentations. I will give each of them 10 minutes for initial comments, and then we will have a short debate. First of all, we will hear from Teresa Martinez, who has a PhD in health science, and she's a member of the psychometric evaluation group of the University of Oviedo in the north of Spain, and she works at the Regional Health Ministry of Asturias in the north of Spain, and she is in charge of long-term care. Along her career, she has done many things. She has combined planning, evaluation, training, research, publishing, and in the last few years she has published studies on person-centered care, and she's going to tell us about how to move towards a person-centered care. Teresa Kinson is a senior researcher of the Dementia Center of the Worcester University in the UK, and she works with a group of researchers to improve the lives of people with dementia. She has led different research projects on housing and interventions to improve the quality of life during old age. She teaches on different postgraduate courses, and throughout her research career, she has focused on the support to people with cognitive limitations and in understanding the barriers these people face. And she is going to be telling us about the passage from an institution to the home. The next speaker is one of the founders of the Hoogelijk project in the Netherlands, and he is a senior advisor of the Be Advised consultancy. He has represented this institution for a long time, and she has expert in strategic and operational consulting of clients, both private and public. He has managed a series of projects throughout the world, and she has a deep understanding of the problem faced by persons with dementia across the world. Times Magazine and other prestigious media have reported about this project, and he is going to be telling us about the normalization of persons with dementia. So, Teresa, would you like to start, please? Thank you. Thank you, Lola. First of all, I would like to say that it is a pleasure for me to be here with all of you. I want to congratulate the organizers on organizing this event, and thank you for inviting me to be part of it. In my comments, I will be brief. I would like to highlight three aspects which I think are key for care focused on the person, because in this panel we will be talking about models for proper care. The first two have to do with the concept and the meaning of long-term care. I think it is very important to talk about that. And the third one will be specifically devoted to the residential model. Now, first of all, the definition of decent care should be based on an ethical consideration, placing the focus on achieving support for decent life of these persons and placing the person at the center. This is an ethical consideration, and there are a few things that are worth mentioning. First of all, the way we look at people with disabilities, regardless of how old they may be. So when we speak about person-centered care, we speak about rights. We speak about persons rather than speaking about disabilities. We speak about persons who have a right to controlling their lives and to have the support they need to live an independent life. So the key word here is support, because taking care of somebody or receiving care shouldn't mean losing control of your own life. And this is something which on occasions happens. And from there we go to another important idea, which is that taking care of somebody goes far beyond dispensing a series of services from the point of view of person-centered care, because taking care of somebody means accompanying a person throughout their lives or throughout a part of their lives. And of course, this may sound obvious, but in reality, it is extremely complicated. I want to mention two ideas that might help us. First of all, and this was mentioned during the first panel, we still need to keep insisting on awareness raising of society. That is why we need a cultural change. This cannot be done overnight. And you need to do it with interventions at different levels, from the macro level and to the micro level. And I also think it is important, in Spain we have a saying that goes, going from thoughts to actions. And this is very important. We can't just stay at the level of theory. And that is why we need to look at, what happens in day-to-day life. We need to have spaces that allow us to check what we do and how we do it. And there is a lot to do in this respect. In some centers in Spain, they have been doing this for some time, but unfortunately, they are not in the majority. And I hope I don't run on, but I just wanted to mention something about professional care. First of all, we shouldn't forget that care is of an essentially relational nature. Sometimes we have equated professional care with knowing a lot about techniques, but we shouldn't forget the personal aspect. And this is not just a one-way road, where I'm talking about interactions, because there are people who require care, and then there's professionals and family members. So it's not just a question of seeing how a professional should relate and take care of somebody else. We need to talk about interaction, and professional care, and this is important, has to do with very, very specific organizational environments with their own structures, with their own dynamics, with their own history. And decent care is not just a question of treating people well. It is an ethical responsibility of organizations, and this is something that we tend to take for granted or even to forget. But it is essential to be aware of it. So, with respect to this second consideration, I would like to mention three ideas. First of all, it is important to devote resources to transform many of the current organizations that are in charge of dispensing care. Not all of them, but a significant number of them need to move towards different styles of organization where leadership is more shared, where organizational models are more collaborative, less hierarchical, where the autonomy of people is given its rightful importance. This is essential for care to be successful. Secondly, I think we need to give a lot of importance to interpersonal relations. We need to support teams so that they generate trust-based relations. This is of the essence, because if you do not pay attention to these considerations, things are going to be difficult. And trust is something you need to earn, but it requires the right spaces and it requires the right methodologies so that there can be both individual and collective reflection. And number three, and this is something that was mentioned during the first panel, there's got to be support of professionals and of teams. So apart from all the things I mentioned, which of course are related with having enough resources and decent working conditions, decent salaries, it is also important to develop systems that make it possible to support and supervise these teams. If we are not clear about this relational idea, it is going to be very difficult to apply person-focused or person-centered approaches. And finally, I would like to refer to the change that is taking place in the residential model in different countries, such as the Netherlands, the Nordic countries. They have been, renewing things for ages. And in Spain, as a result of COVID, we are now taking our first few steps. And the transformation has to do with going from institution-based care to care that make it possible for people to live in their community. And this is something that we can learn from other contexts, and this is very important. So we are witnessing a very important change. But of course, for this, you require a vision, you require funding, and many other things. Apart from these issues, which are more related with systems, I would like to point out 5 keys in this respect. I will just mention them because I'm sure that my colleagues are going to be referring to them. First of all, diversity. I think that it is not right to think about one single type of alternative housing model. In fact, the difference in many countries has shown us that there are different models possible because people are not all the same, territories are not all the same, so we need to move towards a concept that shies away from institutionalization, but we need to broaden the range of options available and not just think about a single resource as the only one. The second idea has to do with the search for cozy spaces and, close relationships, significant relationships. And I'm sure that we will hear more about this. Another important idea to do with these new alternative accommodations has to do with balancing your private life with social or common life, or life in common. And I think that in Spain here we have formidable challenges because the current residential model was conceived on the basis of residences with shared rooms or shared bedrooms or rooms where lots of people coexist at the same time. So I think we need to leave this behind because privacy, intimacy is a right enshrined in our Constitution, and it is not just a question of luxury. Another important idea has to do with the concept of a home with lifelong care support. Sometimes we organize groups depending on degrees of dependence or degrees of discapacity or disability. But I think that more advanced countries structure the system, structure services in a different way to make it possible for people to live, as they want to live. And the last idea I want to share with you is that this transformation should be based on an approach based on two ideas, which is the community and an intergenerational perspective. Life is, our life is based on our community, and our community is made up of people of different ages. The service portfolio in Spain is still differentiated by age, and I think this is an error, and we should rethink this. We should rethink whether we perhaps want to come up with other kinds of spaces that generate or that make it possible for people to lead a more significant existence. And this is all I wanted to say by way of introduction. Thank you, Teresa. And now I will give the floor to Teresa. She will speak about going from the institution to the home.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry that my Spanish isn't good enough to address you in Spanish. I'm having to do this all in English, I'm afraid. Like my colleagues here, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everyone that's hosted this really important platform. You're all here today because you feel as passionately as we do about making sure that we've got the very best services and the very best care in a long-term perspective, not only, as we've heard, for our older and ageing population, but also for that lifelong journey. I really enjoyed the question from the front here earlier about intellectual disabilities, because we have to remember that when we're looking at long-term care, this is a lifelong process. So, as Lola said at the very beginning, I'm a researcher and educator with the Association for Dementia Studies at the University of Worcester in England. I've had the privilege over the last 11 years of speaking to a lot of people living with dementia and their families and all of the stakeholders around them that support their care. For me, this is really important because our services and our interventions need to be grounded in what makes a difference to people, what makes a difference to their lives and how they can lead meaningful lives. As here in Spain, it's the very same challenge in the UK. We're looking to see how we go from institutionalised models of care, which people fear. I've spoken to a lot of people that talk about the fear of older age, the fear of developing dementia, because they're not confident in the services or the provision for them as they develop, as they get older. We are these older people that you see on the screen. These are services that we're developing for ourselves as well as for our older generations now. So I'd like to pick up on some of the comments that Teresa made and talk about three aspects of interventions that we've been involved in at the University of Worcester. The first of those is around post-diagnostic care. We've been very bad at this in the past. Often people receive a diagnosis of dementia, and that diagnosis doesn't just sit with that person, it sits with the whole family. We've heard a lot about the support that families need to give. So the informal care structure that is involved in supporting someone with dementia. We know that people who are carers, and a lot of our carers are what we call, are you familiar with the term sandwich carer? So these are people kind of my generation that are carers for younger people. So they may be someone who has an elderly relative, a grandparent or a parent who's developed dementia, but they also care for their younger children or their teenagers going through university. So they have those very diverse challenges and being real sandwiched in the middle of that. We know that our informal carers suffer a lot from burnout and stress. And often when people receive a diagnosis of dementia, they're not signposted, they're not supported, they don't know the networks of support that are available either in the local community or nationally to support them. So one of the interventions that we've been very involved with since 2014 has been around meeting centres for people living with dementia. So this is a model that came out of the Netherlands and was initially developed by Rosemary Droz, for those of you who know the intervention. And these differ from day centres in that they're very much around the mild to moderate stages of dementia. They're very much involved with creating a member community in that local community so that people feel involved and can drive that agenda forward. So these are places, just common places, church halls, community centres, where people can gather together several times a week for a whole day. You know, so this isn't a sort of a two-hour intervention. This is a whole day where people can have meaningful activity together. They can drive that agenda themselves. They decide what those activities are. They make lunch together. They shop together for those ingredients. So that adds to their quality of life and also the quality of life of their carers. The second thing I'd like to talk about is creating an enabling environment. This is something I'm very passionate about, and in my work as a researcher, for the last 20 or so years, I've worked with young people with autism, with intellectual disabilities. For the last 11 years, I've worked with people with dementia, and what's really important to them is to create an environment in which they can thrive, an environment which is meaningful to them. So for me, creating an enabling environment goes way beyond the fabric of the building, the colours of the walls, the pattern of the carpet. It's also about the care culture that happens within that community. As David said this morning, we need to make sure we have a workforce who are skilled, who understand the population that they support and care for, who want to stay. And what I found from our research when I've done research around enabling environments is that that environment isn't just good for the person with dementia, it isn't just good for the young person with autism, but it's good for the staff that work there. It creates a system where it's easier to support people, easier to support their activities, and easier to support their care, and people stay longer. So as David said this morning, it isn't just about the right pay, it's about the right environment and the right structure to enable our workforce to give that very, very best person-centred care. The next thing I'd like to talk about is our home. We have a saying in England, an Englishman's home is his castle. We don't all live in castles, I wish I did. But our home is really important to us. And we've had a recent report come out that I talked about last week. And one of the phrases that I love out of that report is that everyone needs a place to call home. Now, I think this is something that's really been missing from our institutionalised care. So a lot of care homes I've visited in England have the usual people sat around the edges with a TV that no one's watching. And so we need to create somewhere where people are at the heart of that home, that they feel that that place is their home. One of the models that I've done quite a lot of research about in the UK is around a supported living model called extra care housing. Now, one of my first pieces of work at the Association for Dementia Studies, I think there were over 100 different terms for extra care housing. So I won't go into all of those, but it's commonly known as supported living environments. So these tend to be independent flats where someone can live in their own flat, in their own apartment, in different size schemes. Some of these schemes have got hundreds of apartments and hundreds of people living in those schemes. Some are a lot smaller. Now, the project that we've been working on recently that just concluded at the end of December, we launched the findings last week at the House of Lords, which was a great privilege to be there in London and share these important findings. What we were looking at within that was how does extra care, how does that model support people living with dementia? We know it supports older adults very well. It enables them to have that autonomy and independence within their own lives because they're moving quite often to future-proof their older age. They're moving to somewhere that has good age-friendly communities, has access to activities, has good links with the communities, all the things that are at the heart of what our home means to us. But quite often, when people move there, they are quite independent. So they live in the flat, but they're safe in the fact that that's a community where there's good care available, good person-centred care, should they need it. So as they develop, as they go into older age, if they develop more complex conditions or health needs, they know that that support's there. And quite often, that's a space that's become familiar to them, and there are staff that have become familiar to them, and other residents that have created a whole new community of friendship for them. Now, what we've known less about is how those communities support people with dementia. What I've seen historically in my involvement with extra care housing is actually that model of having a home and having a community supports people with dementia very well, because the friendships they make mean there's a whole community of people to support them as they age and as their dementia develops. So, for example, I saw one community where a lady, I was actually sat in the lounge, and some of the best research, I think, isn't just talking to people, it's sitting and seeing what happens in that environment. So one of the things I saw was that a lady had gone outside, and her friends in the lounge were going, oh, she's gone outside. We'll just keep an eye. Let's make sure she doesn't go out the gate. Let's make sure she's safe. So having that kind of informal structure complements the formal care that's already on site for people. Now, we looked at 3 different types of extra care housing. Integrated, where people with dementia live alongside people without dementia. Specialist, which is exclusively for people living with dementia. And separated, which is where people with dementia live in a separate corridor or on a separate floor. We have a policy now in the UK where the separated model is becoming a lot less favourable. Because why should we differentiate by diagnosis? Why should we not have an inclusive community? But we looked at these 3 models, and we did over 100 interviews with different stakeholders, with people who commission the care, people who provide the care and the housing, but importantly, people who live there with dementia. So over half of those interviews were with people living with dementia. And what we found was actually it doesn't really matter about the model. It matters about having the right place for the right person at the right time. And that is the crux of how we go forward. It's being so person-centred that we know what's right for that person. And we only know what's right for that person by asking the person and asking the families. We've also had an Archbishop's commissioned report, and I'd like to finish my 10 minutes with a little quote from that, which was that it's not about meeting the basic needs, but about the spiritual, emotional, and practical support that we all need to live a full and meaningful life. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Y ahora Eloy nos va a hablar de normalization of people, of persons who live with dementia, with the experience of Hogevik.
Okay, thank you. I have a slideshow to explain a little bit more about the Hogevik, and I have also only 10 minutes. And the Hogevik is not just an institution, it's also an integral care concept, and so I can only explain it very briefly. The Hogevik already exists for 15 years, and we learned so much over those 15 years that we now also have a model, the Be Advised paradigm, that can contribute to this discussion here in this session. And this whole story with the Hogevik started already 30 years ago in a very, what I call, traditional nursing home. The picture on the left. Yeah, it's the left for you. So traditional, with long wards, many people living there, a nursing home, skilled nursing, highly complex care. And in the Netherlands, there's not another place where you can go to if you have advanced dementia. You don't go to hospital anymore. You stay in the nursing home until end of life. Everybody dies there. And that's important to realize. In some countries, people move in the last phase to hospitals and so. In the Netherlands, you stay in the nursing home. So people who are living in the Hogevik have advanced dementia and are supported until death. The story started in that old-fashioned building where Jeanette Spearing, my colleague, was not happy with the care that was provided. Nobody said, I want to go to the nursing home because it's not a nice place. There's nothing to do. And so in that old building, we started in 1993 a pilot, a demonstration project, bringing back normal life in the institution. And we started that demonstration project without a lot of money. So it's not about money, it's about your vision on people living with dementia. We brought back the kitchen in the ward. Not one kitchen for 33, but 3 kitchens at a ward for 33 people. So we made smaller groups of people, 11 at that time, 11 people living together. Now I would say that's too much. Although some models talk about small scale and they have 15 people. But I would say 11, that's a nice scale to start. And we saw immediately improvement in behavior. We didn't make just groups, but we looked at their norms, their values, their ideas on daily life. Who are you? And we matched people according to their lifestyle. We started this project in that old-fashioned building, and it was a huge success. We transformed the whole building into a building with smaller groups of people, with a restaurant, with a cafe, with everything what we have nowadays in the Hogevik as well. So it was a success, and we thought, what can we do as next step? And this question came up in 2002, 20 years ago. And in our opinion, the next step was, you don't want to live in an institution, in a building like that. You want to live in a house. You want to live in a community. You want to live in a normal society. So our next step was a community with houses and streets and a lot of outdoor space and all kinds of amenities you find in normal communities. Oh, wrong button, sorry. So we changed our model and the way we look at people living with dementia. We don't talk about patients anymore. If you talk about patients, you look at the disease and you look at a demented person. No, we want to look at people with big health issues, dementia, and other comorbidities as well. And so, but people with dementia who really need skilled nursing care, a nursing home, are still able to do a lot. Some still walk, some still can cook or want to participate. People with dementia in traditional care models, we took away normal life. All those normal, recognizable daily life activities, like cooking, like going to the shop, like going to a walk, we say, please be seated. I take care of you instead of I support you in living. No, I take care. And if I say to you, please be seated, sit down, I take care of you. After 3 days, you sit on your butt all day, maybe in front of the television, and you don't live anymore. So we brought back normal daily life and looked at people with dementia about their possibilities, abilities. And so we used these 3 guiding principles. We wanted to deinstitutionalize our institution, and officially the Hoogewijk is still an institution. We want to transform and we want to normalize the living environment and all normal daily life. So we created the Hoogewijk as a neighborhood where people are living together in a group home with max 7 people. 7 people living together, and they are living together with more or less the same lifestyle, the same preferences in daily life. In the Netherlands, people have different preferences. Some people like classic music, some people like the folk music. Some people traveled a lot all around the world. They like the world cuisine, Spanish food, Italian food. But some traditional people in the Netherlands never traveled. They only like the traditional Dutch food, which means potatoes, potatoes, and potatoes, and vegetables and meat. So if you live in a house with 7 people and traditional people are living together, the staff who works only in that house and always the same familiar face, so you can create a bond, and you know the habits and the norms and the values. You know the person, the whole life story, not only your name and medication, life story. You cook in that traditional house, traditional meals. And in the cosmopolitan lifestyle house, where more people are living who traveled, who like art, museums. That's not what traditional people in the Netherlands like. Art, museums, world cuisine. They live together. They also cook the potatoes, but also Spanish food, Italian food. And the music is classic. And in the traditional, it's folk music. If you have to listen to classic music you don't like, you will become stressed. And in traditional care, if somebody starts ticking all day because something is not okay, in traditional care, irritating is this, isn't it? And in traditional care, you will say, look, it's dementia. Eloy has dementia because he's ticking. But maybe it's the classic music I have to listen, but I don't like classic music, so I'm stressed. But I have dementia, and I don't know that that is the stressor. So with this concept where you live in a small home, according to your lifestyle, but where you are also able to go on a walk whenever you want to go on a walk. So you are outside and you see the picture with the fountain in the middle where 3 residents are sitting. They came together there all day. They became friends, but they are living in 3 different houses. And you can socialize. You can be yourself. You can decide every moment of the day where you want to be. In your own room, your private room, in the shared living room, or outside in the community where you can walk around, socialize, where you can go to the restaurant for a drink, or go to a club or an event where you are a member of. And clubs and events and activities are held outside your house in the community. So you can walk around. And it's not just one garden you can go to, no. You can walk around in streets, different spaces. Some people like the more crowded spaces and some like the more quiet spaces. So also outside you have choice. And this is still highly complex care. The Hoogewijk is still a nursing home. You are looking at pictures of a skilled nursing facility. The same residents, let's say patients that are living in the Hoogewijk, live in other institutions in the Netherlands as well. And we have the same budget, the same financial system. It's not for profit care. So it's not about finances first, it's about your vision on how you look at people living with dementia. And what do people with dementia really need? Do they need the best care worker all the time, or do they maybe want to go on a walk on their own and take the risks of maybe falling? Wrong button again. So if we look at the pillar health, and we have a concept and we focus on health, it's about enabling people to be themselves, to go on that walk. And many people in the Netherlands said 20 years ago, Eloy, you're completely insane and stupid because people with dementia are fragile. They are in your institution because they cannot stay at home, and that's correct. But they can still walk. And if you enable people to be themselves, to go on a walk, to decide by themselves what they want to do, they are less stressed. They're in a better physical condition. They are less agitated. And so part of the model is that you bring back normal life. And so some residents really want to help in the cooking. So we cook in the 27 houses, the Hoogwijk has 27 houses with 7 people. They cook 27 different meals every day. It's up to the team of care workers and residents what they want to eat and cook. And so you see a completely different outcome in quality. We expect, in general, that when people have dementia, they get worse, worse, worse. They are treated on bed or maybe only sit in a chair all day long. But we know, although people get worse, that you can influence the way people degrade in their disease. If you allow them to do much more, if you give them freedom back, if you look at them as a person and not as a patient, you see, and this is the outcome of the Hoogwijk model, that people are in a much better physical, mental, social condition for a much longer time. And yes, they all die. They all pass away. But you must discuss, and it's part of our model, what do you really need in this last phase of your life? Do you want to be treated all day long, or do you want to live? And where do you want to live? I'm not sure if that green line ends at the same place as the red line. I don't care. It's about quality of life for the individual, and that differs per individual, what is quality of life. And that's most important. And so we learned a lot during the last 30 years. We made the Hoogwijk. There was no evidence first, but now there's a lot of evidence and research available. And so we dare to talk about a model. And if you want to make a change in the way we care for people, not only in institutions, but also in home care and day centers, and everything we were talking about, if we want to make a change in society, we need to discuss these 7 pillars that are part of the Hoogwijk concept, but also our more general model. We need to talk about the nice, favorable surrounding. And then from the perspective of the individual, and what does home mean? So a group home, but maybe a group home is not the best solution. So an apartment for some other people is better. The Hoogwijk only provides group homes now. That was a choice 20 years ago. But now we see, no, maybe some other housing options as well. And we need to discuss the surrounding from the living environment, everything outside your house. And so we have to discuss lifestyle, we have to discuss how you look at health, and I know that in other countries they have a different view on care and treatment than in the Netherlands, despite end-of-life care or even euthanasia. Euthanasia is not possible in the Hoogwijk, by the way, but it's about how do you look at end-of-life, what kind of treatment do you still do, and where do you stop treatment and provide comfort care in the last moments. We have to look at pleasures of life, and so the Hoogwijk provides an event office with 35 different kinds of clubs you can attend. It's your choice to attend. The organization, we have to change the way we organize the care, but also the policymakers are important, and we need to include people with dementia in society. So the social inclusion is very important, and not separate people. So this is now recognized in the world, and my daily job now as an advisor, I was the manager and the founder of the Hoogewijk for many years until 2015, but now we see that many people want to be inspired by the Hoogewijk. They visit, we do study days, and you see that there are new initiatives in the world now coming up. In Australia, of course in the Netherlands, but also in France, Village Landais was in the news a lot lately, in Italy, but also in many other countries, Norway, etc. And they all make their own model based on the Be Advice paradigm. They all make their own innovation and their own steps. So we always say, don't copy the Hoogewijk, but learn and apply it. And the Hoogewijk model is also applied, for example, in a day center in the United States, where they really look in a different way at people living with dementia than they did in the past. And so these are my two colleagues as well, and so we are happy to guide the innovation in the world. But it will be, it will be a long, take some more time, a long time. So we need to have patience, but also a clear vision, and that should be the discussion today, a clear vision where we want to go to, how we look at people living with dementia. Thank you.
Thank you, Eloy.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, the three of you, for this great effort in summarizing. I'm sorry for the lack of time, but I've got many questions for you, but I'm going to synthesize them and pool them in order to make a round of questions so that you have a little bit more time for the answers as well. Please do not dwell too much so that we have enough time with the debate, for the debate with the audience in order to answer some questions. Teresa. We are talking about a new model, a new approach, person-centered. Do you think there are some risks in how we are understanding this? Can there be some misunderstandings, some risk in its application? And what are the main challenges for the professionals as well? Well, I think that person-centered attention is a fad right now, and this has some risks. I think that one of the risks that we have is, and I say it with love, to trivialize what this attention approach is meaning. It's an approach that wants to give power to the other person, although she has an important deterioration, although the generalized needs of support are there in the case of people with intellectual disabilities. And sometimes we have the risk of being just keeping isolated measures, anecdotal measures. This is an issue in not taking up the essence and the depth. We are talking in a different manner of taking care and relate with the person in order to give her power, to empower her. As in Spain, we go in a hurry, we are looking for the agreement, and we take shortcuts sometimes, and sometimes we can fall in recipes. Well, implement this protocol, and with this, within 6 months, I think that is not having reflected enough upon it, not having understood it. Sometimes we also hear very much about we do this already when we heard the postulates of the person-centered care or attention, and maybe we do that. We have some questions, but we have the risk as well. And I said that before, in just stay at statements and not going over to the day-to-day work. The day-to-day life is essential to go along in this type of activities. And the day-to-day has to do with spaces, but not only with the space, but things that happen, relations in the day-to-day life. And here we have to pay great attention to these things as well. Sometimes we say, no, the person-centered attention, but this is not only for those who have, this is only for those who have a good cognitive capacity, but the patient-centered attention, the term was coined in the United Kingdom with a person with dementia and intellectual disability. They talked of planning for person-centered that happens in this group that tended to become invisible in the institutions, in the centers as well. And obviously, we are talking about a concept of support, so that the person is self-guiding her with important support, sometimes through the representation as well. And above all, trying to maintain identity and the right to their own life, although the supports are very, very intense. Thank you very much, Teresa. Teresa, I would like to ask you if... No, I'm talking to the other Teresa. We've got two Teresas in the panel. Yes. I would like to ask you if you can go more into depth in the concept of what does it mean life with significance when we talk about a population with cognitive limitations and dementia. What does it mean to maintain their independence in this passage from the institution to the home?
Thank you. The next Teresa. Oops, sorry. Yeah, independence and a meaningful life. I think my colleagues on the panel have explained that very well, actually. When we talk about a meaningful life, that's a normal, ordinary life. A life where we still have autonomy and we have control and that plays to our strengths. Because quite often we are disabled through the services that seek to support us. The care that Eloy mentioned, where you, let me do this for you. And we're so averse to letting people take risks anymore. So a lot of our care institutions and our organisations prevent us from doing that freedom of walking that Eloy mentioned. We know in our care homes there's a lot of stressed behaviours around people wanting to walk with a purpose. And we've been very bad at understanding that. So maybe for a person to have a meaningful life, they need to be able to walk. They need to access those outdoor spaces. If you're a person, one of the ladies I spoke to on one of my projects, she used to do marathons and she did a lot of hill walking and trekking. And in fairness, she said, I can't do it anymore, my knees are too bad. But her cognitive abilities weren't diminished to the point where she didn't recognise that as meaningful. So the organisation that supported her had found different ways of helping her to do that. They talked with her about what were your hill walking experiences like? Let's look at some photographs. So physically, she may not have been able to do that activity anymore, but being able to have some meaning in her life around what that experience was like was around supporting her in different ways to remember that experience and to look at photographs and talk about her experiences and value the strengths that were still in her life. So I think when we think about independence, we need to think about what we're doing as an organisation to support that. And certainly extra care housing that we've mentioned, the apartments, is a really good opportunity for people to maintain their strengths, to be able to flex that care in levels which suit them best, to be able to understand the person living with dementia to a point that we know what they need, so that we're not over-supporting them and diminishing their strengths, but we're supporting them to stay engaged in a life that's meaningful for them. So, for example, I spoke to one organisation where they had their own restaurant on site. So an extra care housing scheme will usually have a hairdresser's, an activities room, a restaurant or cafe, access to the community, the local community, good links in and out. And I spoke to the restaurant staff as part of my interviews, and they said, we love this job because actually we get to see people every day. And I notice when so-and-so doesn't come down for lunch anymore. So I say to the care team, maybe you just want to check on Mrs. Smith. See if she's okay, because she hasn't been down for lunch for the last couple of days. Because I think with extra care housing and with that independent apartment comes a risk that Teresa spoke about that risk and that tension between privacy and isolation. We want to maintain spaces where we can have that privacy, our own life, our own family to visit, but we don't want to become isolated. And quite often, as people's dementia develops, there is a real risk that people become isolated because they don't remember to go to the activities, or they can't navigate their way around the space anymore. So good wayfinding is important, making sure that they've had opportunities to become familiar with that environment, so they've moved in early enough to understand the environment. Again, I spoke to one gentleman, and he said, he was new to the scheme. He hadn't lived there very long. And he said, I find it really difficult to get to the dining room. Do you know what I have to do? I have to walk down the stairs, outside, all the way round to the front door, because there's a sign there for the dining room. Why do we continue to disable people? Why can't we find ways, simple ways, talk to people, find out what it is they need in their environment to give them those strengths, to give them that meaningful life and to support their independence?
Yeah.
Thank you, Teresa. Eloy, in your opinion, what makes the Hoogeweg project different? Because I understand it's not just a question of building communities. There's a lot more behind it. And what can we learn from your 20 years experience for our future?
The Hoogeweg, I think, and that's why you should visit, is a great example what really person-centered care means. Because with person-centered care, you need to get rid of the tick lists care workers have to follow. You have to observe the resident in front of you first and maybe allow him to do whatever he wants to do, dress himself, take time, because we are not in a hurry. So what does person-centered care, and that's a term used by everybody, every website, person-centered care is there, but what does it really mean in reality? And we still see a lot of institutionalized organizations who talk about person-centered care, but in the end, the organization is dictating how the day of the resident, often patient, is looks like. So it's a great example how to operationalize, how to see in practice how person-centered care can be applied. At the other time, the Hoogeweg is already 20 years old. So we can also discuss the next step. For some organizations, what we do with freedom, allowing residents to be themselves and to do whatever they want to do, we are a great inspiration. But building Hoogewegs is not the solution. Maybe transforming existing institutions into a model like the Hoogeweg, giving more freedom to residents. And you can do that without a lot of money if you change your vision, your approach, how you look at people with dementia. So this can be done in very terrible buildings. We showed it ourselves. So it's not about money, it's not about building something new, it's about how do you look at people with dementia. That's what we can do and change. And at the same time, we must work on the awareness already mentioned in society, how we look at people with dementia, how we try to keep people as long as possible at home with good home care. And also when you provide home care, you must discuss, do they need care or do they need other things? So also the social approach, we talk about the social approach in delivering care at home should be discussed, like we do in the Hoogeweg in an institution. But you can also deliver that at home. And looking in society, what else do we need to support the individuals that are living at home? Already mentioned today, day centers, but not where you are treated as a patient, but where you are seen as a person. So we need to create awareness, and I've seen a lot change in society in the Netherlands already. We need to create awareness, how we can live together with people with dementia. And for some people with advanced dementia, another place like the Hogewijk or another institution with a good model is the last place where they move towards. But the majority will live at home, supported by professionals, family, and society. So the Hogewijk is not a solution, but we must change the way we look at people living with dementia.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias, Eloy.
Demencia.
Bueno, abrimos el turno de debate para atender preguntas de...
Okay, we will open the floor for questions and comments. I would like to ask you to be as brief as possible when asking your questions or making your comments. We are going to be collecting a few comments together so that we can address them all at once. Hello, why is it that in Spain there are so many private nursing homes and so few public? There's a lot of private nursing homes, but very few. There's a lot of private nursing homes, but very few public ones. Why is it? Hello, I'm very interested in living together spaces. And what type of professionals see to people in these living together places? In Spain, unfortunately, well, things have not quite reached that level. Unfortunately, we don't have any regulations. We are trying to implement these units, but it's like driving a car when you are blind. Because, for residents, for family members, and for professionals, we really... So in those images you have shown us, in those living together units in the Netherlands, it's all idyllic because the weather is wonderful, everybody's lounging in the garden, basking in the sun, there's cafeterias, everything is idyllic. But I would like to ask you, how is this really happening? Because we see two very elderly people with many conditions, concomitant conditions. But because elderly people who have no dependents are at home, they are not in our nursing homes. Thank you. Any other questions? I think there were some other questions, yes? Yes. It's me here. Hello, yes. Hello, good morning. I wanted to ask you, this care model for elderly people that you mentioned, which is the one that we are trying to implement in Spain, was it born like that? Did it start like that? Or has it changed gradually with time? I mean, in terms of the way in which professionals work with residents. And have you increased the ratio of workers to residents? And I also want to know whether this has led to an increase in the money, in the funds needed to see to these people, and how you managed to increase that budget, if you did need to increase it. I wanted to thank the speakers for their presentations, and mine is not a question, it's rather a comment. It's a comment about what I've heard. And I received a message on my mobile phone on the 15th of February. This was an article or an advert in a Spanish newspaper saying, we buy nursing homes from 100 beds and 2 telephone numbers, a landline and a cellular phone. So that type of advert, stands in stark contrast with what you've said. In Spain, we obviously live in a different planet. Thank you. Well, there's another question there, yes? Okay, afterwards we will have another round. Teresa Martinez, would you like to kick off? Yes, there's so many important things to say. I will start by the hottest topic, which is the question of the business of private nursing homes. Obviously, there are lots of private nursing homes because the public sector moves very slowly and because there is business in it. But of course, public administrations should rise to their responsibility, not just the central government, but also the regions. They've got to regulate this area, and they also need to evaluate the quality of these private homes. That is why it is necessary for the authorities to get their act together in this respect. I don't think we should also oversimplify things, because you can't establish a one-to-one correspondence between, private nursing homes, poor quality, public nursing homes, good quality. No, I think we shouldn't be oversimplistic. We need to evaluate things on a case-by-case basis. For example, working conditions, good staff-resident ratios. All of these things are very important, but there's many other things that should be evaluated. For example, the care model used and all the different issues that we mentioned during the session. I think that we have a huge challenge. We need to define new inspection systems to check the quality offered by private centers. And this is not sometimes related with infrastructures, but with other elements. And that is what other more advanced countries have been doing, evaluating the real quality dispensed to residents. And this is an important priority. Then there was a question about living together units. And these living together units, I was very lucky because I visited the Netherlands, and this is a system conceived for people with advanced dementia, right? Which means that these types of units are conceived for people who need significant support. And at the beginning it may seem strange, but I can assure you that it does work. And in Spain, there are some publications which already shed some light. It is true that different regions are trying to take their first steps in this direction, but we need to embrace scientific evidence. There are reports that are already pointing out to some characteristics that, these living together units should comply with. In Spain, we have already taken some initial steps. Of course, you need to take into account the number of residents, and it is also important to think beyond changing the physical structure of things. We also know that there are other elements which are decisive for the well-being of residents. We already have information in that respect. And then there's the new skills needed, the new skills that these professionals have to develop, because we're not talking about a model that is not professional. On the contrary, this is a care model that requires a higher level of professionalism, but for this, of course, you need support and you need certain ratios. And this can only be achieved with the necessary funding, because this is very necessary for people who can no longer stay at home. Eloy, Teresa, would you like to add anything?
Yes, it looks idyllic, and this is a problem I have on these kind of events always, because people, but also my Dutch colleagues, don't believe that we have the same patients, people with advanced dementia, who need a lot of care for dementia, but also average people have 4 comorbidities. and 40% of the residents is wheelchair-based. They don't believe that this is possible for people with advanced dementia. So that's a chicken and egg discussion. If you think in a traditional way, put people in bed, they will be bedridden. I know in some countries, for example, South Korea, to take a country that's far away from here, more visits, we have many visitors from South Korea, they just say they say 50%, 50 of the residents, patients, with this type of disease are treated on bed all day long. And in the Hogewijk, with 188 residents, only 2 or 3 are treated on bed. And those 3 will pass away within a few days. So we don't recognize that people are treated on bed for a long period. It has nothing to do with the bricks and the mortar and the freedom to walk around. It has to do with how we look at people living with advanced dementia, how we support them, how we provide care. So it's about your vision on how you look at people with advanced dementia. It all starts with vision. It doesn't start with money, budgets, regulations. You can implement the Hogewijk model in every country worldwide, but you need to have guts to think differently, to think out of the box, and just show that it can be done. So the first examples in Australia and New Zealand had a lot of guts to change the existing model that was there in place. And in all countries, they said, but we need evidence. If you wait for evidence, and if you wait that the government change the regulation, you can wait for decades. So you have to start tomorrow with changing your vision, you as a care provider, maybe an owner, and then start doing and apply it. And then you will show that things can be done differently. You can use the Hogewijk as an example, that it can be done, but you have to start tomorrow in the way you look at people with dementia. So it starts with vision and the will to change or to innovate or to make an additional step. I never visited a nursing home in Spain, so I cannot share an opinion about skilled nursing in Spain. But I've seen many nursing homes worldwide, and they are not nice places. But all those places can be changed in a model like the Hogewijk. You make different choices, but you can change the way you look at people with dementia. So it starts with vision and not with bricks and mortar. And yes, it's nice to have a neighborhood and people and more space, but it starts with the way you care and support people with dementia. So scientific evidence is necessary to let the governments change their mentality, the way they look at care. That's how our societies, I would say, sadly work. But 20, 30 years ago, when we changed our model of care, there was no evidence at all, and we just started with common sense. How do you want to live when you need this type of care? How do you want to live? How do you want that your mom is treated? That should be your starting point. And don't accept anymore the way the care is delivered. You have many private companies now that jumps into this gap. They see money and they want to, they improve the model a little bit, but they earn a lot of money. And David said it this morning. In the US, they have a profit of 30-40% on the total turnaround. 30%. We work in the Hogewijk with a margin of 2%, and it's non-profit. So we don't earn money, but we invest the money in the way we support people. And with providing a different care model, you save a lot of money on one hand, because you don't need a big institutional kitchen with a logistic system. You need a normal kitchen in that house, and the care worker is already there to cook. We have a supermarket in the Hogewijk, which is seen as more costly, but at the opposite, it's saving money. It's a nice activity to go and walk to the supermarket. with a care worker and a resident, maybe. And so you don't need a whole logistic system. We do all the laundry in every house. 27 houses, 27 washing machines and tumble dryer, like you have a washing machine at home. The laundry is done by the care staff. So you don't have a high invoice at the end of the month of an external firm who do all the laundry for you. It's done in every house by the same staff who cooks, who cares, and supports residents. So you have to flip your organizational model as well. Starts with vision, and then you have to change everything. So it's complex, but it's doable. You can do this in Spain, you can do this in every country as well.
Thank you, Louis. Teresa, do you want to add?
Yes, I totally agree. We need to change the ethos of our care culture. So in the UK, we have people living at home, we have care homes, we have nursing, and we have the extra care housing supported living model. Now, I went to a brilliant example of exactly what Eloy was saying there. I went to visit an extra care scheme, which was a specialist model just for people living with dementia. Now, it was brand new. It had just been built. The people that lived there and the care staff that worked there had all moved from across the street. So the care home, the care homes are closing a lot in the UK. There's a lot of care home closures. They'd closed the care home, they'd built an extra care model because that's what they wanted as their vision for that county. They wanted to have more people living independently in their own apartments in an extra care housing scheme. So the staff and the residents had moved, and guess what happened? It was a care home. It was a care home that was in an extra care model because the care culture hadn't changed. The mindset of the workers hadn't changed. They were care home staff. So they didn't understand the independent living model, the idea of the whole idea of extra care housing, people's independent apartments. But neither had the culture of the people that lived there. So I went in, I was there for a week, and I went in the one morning and there was chaos in the lounge because the care staff had been told by the organisation, we need to be more extra care. We don't want to look like a care home. So they'd moved everybody's furniture. They'd moved all the chairs to create little clusters in the lounge, little clusters where people could sit and chat, and the residents were up in arms. Why has my chair been moved? Mavis is sitting in my chair, that's my chair over there. So we need to be really mindful that these are people's real lives, but we do need to change that ethos of our care culture. We need to have more vision. We need to be more creative. It isn't always about the money, it isn't about the building, it's about what happens in there and who it happens for.
No es independiente, sino en unidades de convivencia donde lo más importante es la independencia de los residentes. We are going to have a couple more questions. Hello. I would like Eloy and Teresa to tell us about volunteers in your initiatives. Do you have the support of volunteers in these spaces? And what is the role of volunteers? And I think there was one last question, yes? Hello. This is a question for Eloy. I come from a nursing home in Barcelona, and I have no doubts that what you're saying is true. In our case, we don't have the luxury of having that beautiful infrastructure, but we do have the view, we do have the vision. And I agree with you, because having the right vision makes you, allows you to progress and so we, have the right vision. So my question is whether in your communities, how you organize the support residents need when residents get ill or during the last days of their lives. How do you organize the care they need, which is, of course, more specialized? I think there was one very, very, very last question. Hello, I wanted to ask 2 questions, not one. I am a GP, a general practitioner, and when we see people with dementia, after the first diagnosis, they normally vanish from our clinic. So, and the person who comes to see us afterwards is the caretaker, not the person herself or himself. So I think that the cultural change necessary concerns everybody, both residents or the people with dementia and caretakers. And I wanted to ask, in the Hollebeck model in the Netherlands, the family doctor, does a family doctor make visits to people's homes? Yes, you need to be very, very succinct, please. Oh, there is one very, 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 very last question here at the front. I don't know whether we have time. What is the current status of new technologies, for example, AI or robotics for taking care of persons with dementia? Okay. I want to congratulate the members of the panel. I wanted to ask you whether in alternative ways of life, such as co-housing, how in co-housing, how can you actually support people who live in a co-housing setting? So, who would like to break the ice?
First, there was a question about the volunteers, and there was a question about the family doctor. And to make it clear, the Hoogwijk is a skilled nursing facility, so there are a lot of care workers. There are 3 specially elderly care physicians on site, nurses, nurse practitioners, so there's a lot of multidisciplinary support for the people that live in the 27 houses, and in those 27 houses are care workers working with 3 years of vocational training. So really high-trained care workers who are able to give medication and, of course, support in all the daily life activities, showering, dressing. So all the basic care, what we need to deliver according to our national health system in the Netherlands, skilled nursing care, is done by professional staff. Residents are supported and cared for by professionals, by care workers, and when needed, the doctors, the nurses, the psychologists, the dementia care specialists. So they will support the teams in the houses when needed. So you will not find a doctor who walks around in his white uniform coat with the stethoscope around his neck, because that is not normal in a Dutch neighborhood, so it's not normal in the Hoogwijk as well. The doctor will visit, normally in street clothes, when needed, like the family doctor does in a normal community in the Netherlands as well. Volunteers are all additional. We have a lot of volunteers. Before COVID, we had around 120 volunteers working. Now, after COVID, 80, because some volunteers, most of the volunteers are older. They were a little bit scared. So we have less at this moment, sadly. But they assist at home sometimes, just to help with cooking or having nice conversations. They work in the maintenance, in the gardening, but the majority works in the event office. The event office, which is at the boulevard, outside the houses, of course, provides all kinds of clubs and events, 35 music clubs, folk, jazz, classic music, craft clubs, gym, etc. Volunteers assist the professional club leaders to have a nice club and event. And so they will help to pick up the residents who are a member of that club and guide them to the club rooms. So they do some of the logistics, you could say, help them to make it a nice event. So volunteers play a very important role, but are additional. Without volunteers, without having so many volunteers, we should only provide one event during a week, because the Dutch government says you need to provide 30 minutes of activities per week for residents, for patients with dementia. That's the regulation. And we say in our model, in our vision, 30 minutes per week, that's not normal for the majority of the people. So we want to provide much more. And so we have this event office which provides much more clubs and events than the regulation. We can only provide so many clubs and events due to the support of volunteers.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. ¿Cuál de Teresa?
Sí. I just wanted to address also the question of volunteers and also professionally trained staff. So in the UK, a lot of initiatives that happen, particularly in communities, wouldn't happen without the support of volunteers. So I think that volunteer role is really, really important to keep a lot of those community inventions sustainable. I also think the importance of having specialist trained staff is really, really important. And in the UK, we don't have enough funding often to do that. People can be funded through their organisations, but we find a lot of people are self-funded to do that. So we need a better funding policy to be able to ensure that we have really properly, very well-trained staff. In the extra care housing schemes I've worked in, a role that is really, really good in supporting people with dementia is called a well-being enabler. Now, this is a person who really unlocks the opportunities, and I think that's key to understanding how extra care housing can work for people with dementia, is someone there to support them to unlock their potential, to unlock the opportunities and to make sure they stay engaged with that community. Without the wellbeing enablers, and sometimes in one of the schemes I worked in, there were over 300 people and only 2 wellbeing enablers. They were very, very busy, but they worked one-to-one with a lot of people. They made sure people came out of their apartments for the activities, that they didn't get isolated. But most importantly, they knew people really, really well. And they understood the ethos of person-centred care. So we need to make sure that if we've got a vision of the future, we need to take people along with us on that vision. We need to make sure they're well-trained, well-educated, and really understand that person-centred care culture.
Thank you.
May I say one addition to your remark? If you bring normalcy back, if you bring the kitchen back, the laundry back, you have already a lot of opportunities to have meaningful activities that people with dementia also like to do. Some like to cook, some like to clean, to do the dishes, besides all organized clubs and events, etc.
Thank you. Okay.
Han salido dos líneas interesantes.
2 interesting lines have popped up, volunteers and the new technologies. I think that in Spain, these are 2 opportunities in which we have to generate thoughts and we have to generate a new vision. The volunteers, I think it's absolutely indispensable, not only in order to enable resources for the centers, but also to generate a community that is more involved and more committed with the care. I think that this is very important. And for that, we have to generate a social consensus, mainly with the different agents, to see and add nuances. We talked about the limits before, so that they don't enter issues of remunerated professional work. But there is a very, very wide margin to achieve many things, and for that it's fundamental from the services, whether they are in the community, that the services in are the centers to generate collaborative work from an alignment of the concept of the right and good care. And here I think we have a very wide space, and we have to review and to rethink and not be so much afraid about the invasion of volunteers, because apart from being that, from the dual perspective, it's good in order to make these services sustainable. But it is also very positive to generate communities that are involved with the common good and the care. And as to the new technologies, I'm going to be very modest. I'm not an expert, far from that, but also thinking as a future user, that I believe this is always interesting to think it. I think it's a potential that is impressive, that we are afraid of it, but as long as it is put in the center for people, it can offer us many keys in order to advance in a significant care, obviously, and without replacing the human relations with care. But why not? I think there are many keys and many things that it can help us to make more efficient care, more advanced care, more innovative care, and why not sometimes also more attractive. I believe that here we also have to think again. And I wanted to add something, the last thing. We are attending, listening about very interesting experiences, all what Teresa has taught to us. But I also would like to point out that here in Spain, in different autonomous communities, little by little, and thanks to some thoughts that have taken place after COVID and an effort at the national level in different autonomous communities, where we already have initiatives that are progressing in home cares towards more cozy homes with our limits and our possibilities. But we are making the right steps, and we're working on it. And there are already some studies that have been published. We have here colleagues from the Foundation Matías who have done interesting publications, who talked about the goodness and that converge with international results that tell us that this type of models, cozy models, not only are possible, but they are sustainable. And they mentioned the benefits for the persons in plural that live in those spaces, persons with intellectual disability, persons with dementia, in whom they obtain good results linked to the quality of life, linked to a lower agitation and stress, linked to fewer behavioral disorder. They are good for the families because they are more involved in the care and they're more satisfied. And something very important, we have more and more evidence of it as well. I talk about things that have been published. These are resources that are good for the professionals as well. When they are well implemented, when they are consistent, the day-to-day with what we want to pretend to do, because they reduce stress, they make the professionals feel better, because the professionals will go home saying, this is worthwhile. They find a meaning to their job. It reduces, and there are published papers about it, what is called the consciousness stress, the feeling that when I go home, I'm treating well the persons there. We still have a long way to go, a lot of work to do in Spain, much more than in the Netherlands. But I believe that we are also making steps in the movement of intellectual disability is advancing a long way in what has been declared and also in the applications. And here we have to converge all together, talking about persons who deserve better lives in spite of needing care that come from other people. Thank you very much. It's 2:10. We have met the time. It has been a very intense day, but very interesting. It opens new perspectives to keep on discussing and talking about this, and very necessary in order to obtain better lives for everybody. Thank you very much.